Hey everyone, spring skiing here in Bozeman, and because of that we're taking advantage of practicing some fine tuning in our skate technique. One of the things we've worked on in previous posts has been how far we step up a hill. So you can look back at some of those posts where we're talking about using our grid here and thinking about whether we're stepping, too far in, too far out, or just in the right place within our stepping grid. Today we're kind of working on something similar, and that is always thinking about stepping onto an accelerating ski and then off of an accelerating ski. It's common that folks get lazy within their distance skiing sometimes, or their threshold intervals, or when they get tired during a race and they're full of lactate, that you let your skis kind of decelerate, come to a stop before you then step onto the next ski.
First, let's take a look at what I'm talking about in some World Cup footage. I think Therese Johaug is a great example of this. Here we can see her climbing some V1, and just look at her technique compared to the skiers around her. She keeps a slightly higher tempo, but more importantly, she's just kind of getting on and off the ski before it stops moving and stepping onto that accelerating ski. Watch the Swede in the back during this clip. You can see that the Swede who's going past the coach right now is taking a slightly bigger step up the hill, and she's kind of allowing her non-poling leg, her non-poling side especially, to come to a little bit of a stop before she steps off of that ski. A crucial part of this technique is the way Therese keeps her upper body, her torso, very stable and square throughout this V1 technique. You'll notice some of the other skiers who are struggling will tend to rock a little bit more in the shoulders. She's also trained this technique so much that even under fatigue, here at the end of the race, her foot is always striking the snow in the right spot. You can see it always is underneath her center of mass. It's always accelerating down the track, which makes for a really successful climbing technique. For the first part of this progression, I'm going to do a few passes without poles. Here what I'm trying to work on is constantly keeping the feet moving. You'll notice I'm doing this on a slightly flatter hill that then gets slightly steeper as I go, so I'm really focusing on keeping the feet moving, especially on the flat terrain. And then things will get a little more difficult as the hill gets steeper, but I'm still just trying to get on and off a ski as it continues to move. The second important piece I'm thinking about here is keeping my shoulders really square. That's why we start without the poles. So I'm making sure I'm not rocking in my torso at all. And lastly, I'm really focusing on where my foot strikes the snow and how my foot strikes the snow. So I want to make sure my toes are always pointing down into the terrain, and I'm not heel striking, but I'm landing on my midfoot. That will allow the ski to accelerate even better. Now I'll add some poles, but only for a few strides at a time. So here, I'm using my poles to V1, and then I'll pick the baskets up and take a few strides without poles and then bring them back. Next, I want to spend some time playing around with some different tempos and finding the right V1 tempo that I can use in order to keep my skis accelerating the entire time without sending my heart rate through the roof. You'll notice this can be a tough adjustment, and here I'm trying to demonstrate the way a lot of people would ski up a hill, trying to ski easy in L1, or also if they're tired, and this is what we're trying to avoid, these skis coming to a stop each time. But the more we train this kind of technique by doing this on flatter terrain and trying to keep the skis accelerating the whole time and practicing a slightly higher tempo through our V1 in transitions and on flatter terrain, we'll then be able to transfer that into intervals and lastly into race-specific situations. To review, first practice this type of technique without poles and do a few hill repeats on gradual terrain. It will be easier to keep the skis moving the more gradual the terrain, and then practice on steeper hills. Practice using a slightly higher tempo during portions of your L1 workouts. We want to be able to do this easy first and then transfer it into L3 intervals, and then lastly, now that we're comfortable with the technique, we can use it during race situations.